Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're finishing up our study of the Psalms of David that have historical references to them. And we want to visit two more places, and we're going to 2 Samuel. We're going to look at chapter 22 for the next couple of days, then we're going to look at chapter 23. This is towards the end of David's life, or at least of David's story in 2 Samuel. He will die, of course, in the early chapters of 1 Kings. And in chapter 22, we have a song that we are told in verse 1, David spoke to the Lord the words of this song on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. It's hard to know when this would be, to pick a particular date or time in David's story. Maybe when the kingdom was united again, all 12 tribes under his kingship. But I do believe, for reasons that we'll talk about later, that it is written earlier rather than later, not after Absalom, not after all of that, but immediately after he becomes king over all Israel around that time. This seems like the voice David uses when he's writing those psalms. We know, because of the references to them, that he composed when he was a younger man. Psalm 23 is going to contain his last words, and we'll look at that after we look at Psalm 22. The entire chapter, except for that heading verse, is the psalm itself. It's 51 verses. It's long, and it's repeated in Psalm 18. And Psalm 18 even has as the superscription verse 1. And there are some differences, though, differences in spelling, differences in wording. One's 51 verses long, the other is 50 verses long. So there are a few differences that we should not be surprised about. David was almost certainly composing these songs in his head and then singing those songs. We shouldn't be thinking of David as having staff paper and writing down, the music and the lyrics, or even paper at all to write anything down, or even an alphabet. Which asks us, or which causes us to ask the question, did David even have an alphabet? The Phoenician alphabet, which is the only alphabet ever invented from nothing. All other alphabets come from the Phoenician alphabet, was invented sometime in the 10th century BC, the 1100s. So at most, the alphabet itself, as something a person can use to write things down with, is only 100 years old. David is reigning right around 1000 BC. So maybe he had an alphabet, maybe he didn't. That means Moses did not have an alphabet to write things down with. However, Moses, being raised as a prince in Egypt, certainly knew hieroglyphics and had other writing systems, another writing system that he could use. But I think it's more likely that these are songs to help people remember them, not just to sing and to express the emotion, but as a mnemonic device. And so you shouldn't be surprised at all that there are just little differences between, no differences in the meaning, but little differences between 2 Samuel 22 and Psalm 18. This is David's, what I call David's stela, David's obelisk. You know that the kings in the ancient world would build these large pillars and have chiseled on them the pictures and the hieroglyphs or the stories of their victories, and they would brag about themselves and all that they had done and everyone they had conquered. And if you've ever been to the British Museum, you've seen some of these, even some of these that involve people we meet in the Bible, like Sargon II or Mesha, the king of Moab. This is David's stela. This is David's record of what happened that allowed him to become king and ruler over God's people. But it's not about him, it's about God. David didn't erect a monument. David didn't build an obelisk. David didn't commission a statue. David wrote a song of praise to God. I think more than anything else, that's something we need to notice. We're going to talk about this verse by verse, section by section tomorrow. Thank you for joining me today as we introduce David's song in 1 Samuel 22, also Psalm 18. Read that between now and tomorrow, and we'll get into the text that time. Thank you for joining me for 5 good minutes.